Got Scott Wolf on the line from inside USC to break down the Trojans. National Signing Day, the first edition, is 5 days away. Kliff Kingsbury, obviously, that was a huge hire coming from Texas Tech. He definitely has a distinct offensive system that you would think, okay, this is what's coming to USC. Are people excited about that?
Yeah, that's been like the one thing people have been excited about since the season ended. They were furious Clay Helton was kept as the coach, and I think they've had so little to cheer about. The fact that they went out and got Kingsbury's been like something they can rally around. So there's a ton of excitement about him, and we'll see. How quickly he can put in this offense and how successful they'll be. But the fans, I mean, I guess that's like the only thing they have right now to cling to or be optimistic about. So there's a high expectation for him.
Yeah, and there's somewhat of a connection with what you're talking about in regards to not building a premier offensive lines at USC. I think the style of offense that he runs de-emphasizes the offensive line. You always have to have at least a capable offensive line to win. It can't be understated. It's arguably the most important unit on the field. But you de-emphasize it by getting players out in space, getting the hands out of the football out of the hands of the quarterback quickly, and try to limit the vulnerability of the offensive line by doing those sorts of things. But it seems a bit gimmicky rather than actually executing and out manning the other teams in terms of a talent and physical standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, I think the good part is they're going to be exciting. I think offensively to watch, and they're going to probably score points. I guess if you're USC, you always consider yourself to be a colleague of Alabama and Michigan and you name it, whatever power. How many of those schools, run a gimmicky offense that get into the college football playoff every year? So, I don't know if long term this is going to be an answer for them. I suspect Kingsbury isn't planning on being there long. He can go somewhere else, or I know already fans are speculating. Well, if they fire Helton, maybe Kingsbury will take over as the head coach. So I just don't know. I don't see him as offensive coordinator long term for them either.
And Scott, we've got some other moving parts along the coaching staff. If you could run those down for us. And I don't know that you're going to have much of an evaluation of these coaches now. Obviously, they haven't done any work at USC, but if you could run that down for us.
Well, they've hired Greg Burns today as the secondary coach, and he was actually there when Pete Carroll was the secondary coach. Was the head coach. So they've kind of gone back to that era again, which they like to do with Lane Kiffin and Steve Sarkisian and Ed Ogeron, and brought a assistant coach from that era. He was at Oregon State this year, so probably not the greatest hire in terms of just creating some buzz. Definitely not like Kingsbury. They've hired Mike Jinks, who was Kingsbury's running backs as the running backs coach. He was Kingsbury's assistant at Texas Tech, and your viewers might remember he was the head coach at Bowling Green up until I think October. So that's probably a decent hire, I would think. And then they've hired a defensive line coach from Boise State, and I'm not going to pretend I can say his name because I haven't practiced it enough. But he has a good reputation, so I think that was a solid hire. But I just would say to wrap up the staff evaluation right now, I don't know that I see enough dramatic change like people were kind of promised when Lynn Swann put out a statement identifying weaknesses at USC. And I don't know that the coaches they've hired right now are going to be able to make a huge impact on the program based on they've kept Clay Helton, they've kept Clancy Pendergast, the defensive coordinator, and they kept John Baxter, the special teams coach, and they've kept their strength and conditioning coach. So they still, I think, need a lot more changes to be made.
You're right, Scott. More apostrophes and vowels in this name than anything I've ever
Yeah,
seen
you're the
before.
broadcast guy. Why don't you say his name for us?
Well, we've got Chad Kauha'ahaha
There you go.
is what I'm reading right there.
Good job.
Kauha apostrophe AHA apostrophe A.
I don't know if it's
Fascinating.
worse to say it or write it.
Yeah, exactly. At least when you're writing it, you can back up and try again. So only thing that matters from here on out is that he can coach football and coach up the defensive line. He comes in from Boise State, obviously, just a different breed of athlete there, but certainly they have played as close to Power 5 football as anyone has out of the group of 5 consistently over the last 10 years.
The best thing I would say is at Boise, you're overachieving with guys, so maybe that'll work in his favor, and he can try and get some of these highly recruited guys that haven't developed and get more out of them. So, that I think is probably a solid hire, as long as you're the one saying his name and not me.
Well, the thing about these coaches is when they're not the offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator, I don't know that a whole lot of people are going to be saying their names much in the future, because they kind of move their way into the background unless their unit's really, really poor. And then people start to look up the names to see who's responsible for those awful dropped passes at the wide receiver position, right, or the breakdowns in the defensive backfield or whatever it is. All right, we got Scott Wolf on the line from inside USC to break down the recruiting class that comes into play in 5 days on National Signing Day, the first edition on December 19th. And of course, then they wrap up the class that first Wednesday of February. Scott, we always appreciate you stopping by. I know that you've got a number of storylines to trail and enough going on there, but thanks for the time.
Yeah, it's never a dull moment around there. Maybe we should talk around that signing day, because
absolutely. So I'm going to be here all day on Wednesday, nonstop.
I'm sure you will.
So anytime that you've got the time, I will be tracking you down. And when you've got an open window, you are more than welcome.
Because it's going to be interesting to see who they actually sign on Wednesday, and then that's going to set them up for February, because they're going to have to get a few more guys. And
absolutely.
We'll see if they lose some of those guys we talked about. They're going to scramble in the next couple of months afterwards.
Okay, USC trying to bounce back from 5-7, and of course the pipeline is recruiting. And the first D-Day is coming up in 5 days. Scott Wolf from Inside USC helping us break it down. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Mark.